So thank you again, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. This is a Bite of Science, and it's a collaborative webinar that we don't do often, but we like to do it on special occasions between the Teacher Enrichment Program and our STEM lyceums. And this is a topic that both programs wanted to present, so we thought this was a wonderful opportunity to do a joint webinar. So tonight, we will hear from two wonderful speakers speaking on environmental planning and navigating renewable energy. So a little background information on the Center for Excellence in Education. We were founded in 1983 by Joanne DeGennaro and Admiral Wickover, the father of the nuclear navy, and civilian uses of nuclear power, with a mission to nurture high school and university scholars to careers of excellence in leadership in STEM. So we currently have programs for teachers and students, and we focus on these 4 programs. This is the Research Science Institute, USA Bio-Olympiad, Teacher Enrichment Program, and STEM Lyceums. So our Research Science Institute, or RSI, is a highly competitive 6-week summer science and engineering program that is open to rising high school seniors, and juniors are eligible to apply. RSI is the first cost-free summer science and engineering program that combines on-campus coursework in scientific theory with off-campus work in science and technology research. Then we have our USA Bio-Olympiad. This is a premier biology competition for high school students in the United States. It provides the motivation, curricular resources, and skills training to take them beyond their classroom experience to the level of international competitiveness. Since CEE began administering the USABO in 2003, every member of the USA Bio-Olympiad team has medaled at the International Bio-Olympiad. And then the 2 wonderful programs that are hosting the webinar tonight, we have our Teacher Enrichment Program, which provides opportunities for middle and high school teachers to, 1, connect with leading experts from industry and academia, explore cutting-edge research and development, and make meaningful professional links with direct benefits for you and your students. And then our newest program, STEM Lyceums, is a virtual club for high school students to engage in discussions and exploration of STEM concepts of career pathways. So thank you for joining tonight while you explore these pathways that as teachers, you can incorporate into some lesson plans and share with your students. And students, you can learn a little bit more about something maybe you can do in the future.
Jordan and I both, we really wanted to thank CEE for letting us come on this evening to talk just a little bit about what we do for TC Energy, and we'll run through our agenda fairly quickly. And we've already gone through formal introductions. We'll talk about the importance of STEM and what we do, and hopefully, pass along some information that is interesting for others. So, Jordan, next slide.
Thanks so much for having us. My name is Jordan Hayes, and I am the Senior Manager for U.S. Environmental Planning and Permitting here at TC Energy. I focus primarily on U.S. natural gas pipeline projects, specifically those that require new certificates of public convenience and need from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that is often referred to as FERC. Some of those projects include large-scale pipeline replacement projects. I also focus on projects looking into alternative energy solutions such as hydrogen and carbon capture and sequestration. So my interest in the energy industry really grew out of my upbringing in Virginia's coalfield regions. Residents in these areas have a unique understanding of power generation and the resources it impacts to do so. My grandfather was a retired service member and had a second career as an environmental inspector in the pipeline industry. And so he impressed on me the importance of environmental conservation efforts and species protections. In law school, I focused on real property and environmental law. I furthered my interest through participation in moot court, various volunteer opportunities, and eventually a summer internship with an oil and gas production company. During my internship, I worked in the land department, reviewing historic mapping and property ownership documents, such as deeds and leases to develop locations for well pads and gathering line routes for natural gas extraction. I've been working in the energy industry for more than 10 years, focusing on land management, stakeholder outreach, and environmental planning and permitting, which we're going to talk to you about a little bit today.
All right. John Adamson. I'm also a manager of environmental planning and permitting for in TC Energy's U.S. Environment Group. I'm located here in Charleston, West Virginia. I've been in this role or similar roles in the energy industry for 26 years. I'm a graduate of West Virginia University and West Virginia State College. It was still a college when I graduated from there. It's now a university. Work with our teams that are spread across the U.S., primarily Charleston, West Virginia, and Houston. Outside of work, I love to do anything outside, and it really drove my education background in a science background, and love to do anything outside, whether it be fishing, kayaking, or just really being outside. Like Jordan, what drove me to kind of this industry, I was also born and raised in the Central Appalachian coal field. So you're going to hear the twang in our voice every once in a while, and that gives away where we're from. But I saw firsthand, like Jordan said, the need for energy production and energy transportation. I saw the good and the bad of it here in Appalachia. And I always felt like my love for the outdoors and my education background that, maybe I could make a difference in the energy industry. And I feel like I have over my career of ensuring that we're doing things the right way. So that really shaped in my career path, my love for the outdoors, and really where I came from. And that led me to where I am today.
I'm going to share.
There's the energy you see, and the energy you don't. Think about buying things online. It feels like a few clicks and your order gets shipped. But a lot of energy goes into that. First, your laptop needs charging. Search engines need power for their servers. So do the computers and software that process the order. And don't forget about the lights and heat in the factory. It all takes energy. To keep forklifts moving, to help produce boxes, packaging, tape, and labels. To ensure ships and airplanes reach their destinations across the globe. Even the gasoline in the trucks that drive right to your door. We can't keep the lights on without energy, but there's also the energy we can't see that powers our world far beyond our four walls. There's the energy you see.
So I really love that video because it talks about, or it really brings to light, the energy industry in more than just the simple concept of power generation from our homes, but it really takes a look at the larger need for energy across the world. The world is facing an ambitious and critically important challenge: the need to evolve to a lower carbon, lower emission energy economy while continuing to grow the global demand for safe, reliable, and affordable energy. The need for responsible energy solutions is clear, as is our obligation, ability, and opportunity to bring solutions forward. We're working every day to address this challenge for ourselves, our customers, our children, and our communities where we live and work. We are building the energy system of the future, and ultimately, we at TC Energy and within the energy industry are energy problem solvers. So we're a team of, at TC Energy, we're a team of 7,000 plus energy problem solvers working to move, generate, and store the energy that North America relies on. We're taking action to make that energy more sustainable and more secure, and we're innovating and modernizing to reduce emissions in our own business and delivering new energy solutions to help others in industries decarbonize theirs as well. we understand that every form of energy needs to be available with the lowest emissions possible to meet society's needs. The North American energy mix continues evolving and requires an all-of-the-above solution to maintain affordability, reliability, and deliver greenhouse gas emission reductions. Infrastructure, like that of TC Energy, provides the backbone for this evolving continental energy system. We continue to expand our capabilities and investments in renewable and low carbon energy solutions such as hydrogen, carbon capture and sequestration, and renewable natural gas. So let's talk about one of the forms of energy that powers our world, natural gas. Natural gas plays a critical role in the global energy transition. It is a reliable, high-efficiency energy source that's displacing coal-fired power while backstopping the intermittency of renewable power sources. Natural gas is the cleanest burning fossil fuel, and as demand for energy increases, expanded use of natural gas has helped improve the air quality across the country by offsetting the use of higher carbon-intensive fuels. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, between 2005 and 2019, carbon dioxide emissions from the U.S. power sector declined by 33%, with natural gas accounting for more than half of those reductions. This resource is delivered daily through a robust network of pipelines, which transports the natural gas from supply basins to local distribution companies, power generation plants, industrial facilities, interconnecting pipelines, LNG export terminals, and other businesses across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. TC Energy has a 58,200-mile network of pipelines that transports about 25% of North America's demand for natural gas. This same system also moves approximately 30% of the natural gas destined for LNG export or liquefied natural gas export to markets around the world, creating a safe and reliable resource of energy for our allies.
Now, Jordan, I would like to jump in there, Jordan. One thing I would like to add, and just some interesting tidbits on natural gas, is that it heats 77 million homes in the U.S. and currently generates about a third of the total electricity generated here in the U.S. So I just thought those were interesting numbers to add as Jordan talks about the TC system and the importance that natural gas plays in the energy portfolio here for the U.S.
Thanks, John. Those are great tidbits to add. So when we're talking about a resource like natural gas, it really has an extensive use within North America and around the world. And so we wanted to talk today a little bit about STEM's role in the energy industry. So how is STEM involved in the energy transition process, as well as the everyday operation and use of energy within the natural gas industry in particular? So STEM is involved in nearly every aspect of the industry, from project design to environmental management, to operation of those facilities and the footprint, even down to the finance that's involved in continuing to keep this industry afloat and supplying energy to the world. So the nice thing about STEM is that STEM helps us to blend these sciences, and it's the blending that ultimately makes a project successful. And so one of the things we wanted to do today is take the opportunity to talk to you about a specific project and really better emphasize STEM's place in this particular project and how that project not only benefits the system itself and creates a safer and more secure system, but also benefits the public as well. So John's going to talk to you a bit today about our WB Express project in West Virginia.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. So we did want to focus on our recently completed WB Express project. We wanted to highlight how engineering, environment, and stakeholder outreach came together to ultimately help supply the energy needs of the U.S. So if you want to, Jordan, go on to the next slide. All right, so the project scope, there you go. There you go. Project scope. This project was actually in multiple states, but we're going to focus on the portion in West Virginia, the areas that presented some unique challenges from a terrain standpoint, some environmental sensitivities that we managed through. So we're going to focus on that particular portion of this overall project. WB Express, what does that mean? WB within our system, that's an existing pipeline. That WB stands for Washington, Baltimore. So for any folks over in that Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, if you have natural gas at your house, there's a very good chance that it got there through this particular system. This system flows gas towards the Northeast, and the Washington, Baltimore area is the prime user of the gas in this system. The project consisted of 29 miles of pipe replacement, construction and modification of 2 natural gas compressor stations, and upgrades at 7 existing compressor stations. It was in multiple counties in West Virginia, as you can see on the slide. It was also in multiple counties over in Virginia as well. We wanted to focus on that West Virginia section, like I said just a little bit earlier, to talk about those challenges and how we blend science and technology together to move energy forward. So next slide.
If you don't mind, before we move to the next slide, we had a question come in of what exactly are compressor stations?
Okay, so I'll take that one. So as gas flows along inside the line, a compressor station, if you've ever stopped at like a gas station or a convenience station, you had to put air in your car tire. And there's a compressor that compresses the air so you can get that air into your tire and pump up your tire. It's the same concept with a natural gas compressor station. They're stationed along the pipeline and the gas flows through the pipeline, but there are certain points where we have to pump up that pressure to send it on down the line. So that's what it does. Just think of it as that little compressor that you pump up your bike tires with or your car tires with, but it moves the gas on down the line.
John, thanks so much for adding that. So before we move on I'm going to move on and talk about regulatory and stakeholder outreach and how we work with the agencies to plan and permit a project like this. But before we jump into that, are there any questions that John and I can answer about the general project or our roles? All right. If not, we'll go ahead and talk a bit about, like I said, the regulatory and stakeholder outreach. So one of the primary goals for our group is to work with our project teams, with our engineers, our project managers, our land agents, to develop the scope of the project, and then take that scope of the project and work with our regulating bodies to obtain any permits to ensure that all environmental assessments are completed to do that. So natural gas pipelines, interstate natural gas pipelines, pipelines that are moving gas from one state to another, are regulated under the Natural Gas Act by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or as I mentioned earlier, we commonly refer to them as FERC. So if you hear me using that term, that's who we're talking about. So for a project like WB Express to be approved, FERC must assess the environmental effects of the proposed actions prior to making any decision. So before we can move forward with a project, we have to develop an application, present that to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and go through what's called a NEPA review process. So this review is a comprehensive study that identifies environmental impacts of a land development action and analyzes a broad set of parameters, including biodiversity, environmental justice, wetlands, air and water pollution, traffic, geotechnical risks, public safety issues, and also hazardous substance issues. So there's a broad range of reviews that go into this more comprehensive review. So completion of the review requires a multidisciplinary approach with input from multiple stakeholders, both internally with the applicant, so with a company like TC Energy, and externally with state, federal, local agencies, as well as impacted landowners and the public as well. So WB Express in particular required significant advanced stakeholder engagement as the route crossed wetlands, water bodies, species habitats, and a national forest. So the pipeline was actually in place many years before, and likely even before the project or the area was deemed a national forest. So in working with those agencies, we wanted to make sure that we were communicating early, that we were taking their input, that we were asking them for specific areas of areas of concern, species of concern, things like that, to work with them to develop this package and ensure that we had completed a robust and accurate assessment of the potential environmental impacts. So for this particular project, like I said, we worked closely with the agencies. Some of the specific agencies for this project were U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Department of Forestry, West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection, as well as the West Virginia State Historic Preservation Office. And so all those folks work together with our team here at TC Energy to go through this review process to ensure that we had identified and evaluated all the potential impacts to the environment.
So some of the uniqueness of Eastern West Virginia and the Appalachian region is really the intense terrain or really steep mountains. This portion of Eastern West Virginia has the higher elevations in West Virginia. It has the longer steep mountains that we traversed with this pipeline. In the picture in the slide, it depicts bulldozers that are cabled together that actually hold the piece of equipment that you can't see in the picture that is digging the ditch for the pipe replacement. So the picture is really to depict, and I wish the picture could show it just a little bit better, but show the intensity and the steepness of the terrain. So that steepness of the terrain, it added complexities to the project, and it really highlighted the need for extensive upfront planning. As Jordan talked about, the tremendous need for stakeholder engagement through the agencies, through the land managing agencies, but really planning on our part, TC Energy's part. We're going to talk more on the next couple of slides about the specifics of planning for these activities, but as we plan projects like this, several things that we're keeping in mind as we plan are worker safety, pipeline design, environmental protection, and implementation of those environmental protections. They're all considered as we develop these plans for these types of projects. So as I said, project planning is very important for these types of activities. And while I pulled this particular slide from another project, it does depict the level of planning needed to safely and effectively plan for the types of projects. So with the WB Express project, as Jordan talked about, we crossed a national forest. It's the Monongahela National Forest. It's home to several sensitive species habitats. It's commonly used for outdoor recreation. Some of that intense and difficult terrain called for individual and slope-specific planning. So every hill on that project, every steep slope, every sensitive habitat that we crossed had something similar to what's being shown on the screen of every detail planned out before we ever got there. So this brings the sciences together. It brings groups like Jordan and I, our environmental scientists, together with engineering, together with our land groups, together with our stakeholder outreach groups, to ensure that the activity that we're doing, one, meets regulations that apply for those areas, but we have basically every detail planned out as you're working in that type of terrain with those steep slopes and those very sensitive habitats. This project chose to use the lift and lay construction technique. And what that means is, Jordan talked about, the pipeline was already in this place. We replaced it with a newer line. So we lifted the old pipe out of the ground and laid the new pipe back in the same general trench. What this does is it allows us to utilize existing rights of way to reduce our potential impact to those sensitive habitats that we knew we would cross. So we use that technique to further the environmental protection for this type of activity and reduce those impacts across the Monongahela National Forest. You can move on, Jordan.
And John, just to add a note in there, so this particular project was interesting. We were talking about site planning and using a replacement method where we were removing the old pipe and replacing that with a new pipe in the same ditch. One of the interesting things about the Mon National Forest is that, so for a portion of this crossing of this WB pipeline crossing, the footprint or the right-of-way corridor for this line is actually utilized by the Mon National Forest as a boundary between the National Forest and the National Wilderness. And there are different rules, and there are not just for industry, but for the general public and for the forestry department themselves in areas of national wilderness as opposed to national forest. And so for this particular project, our pipeline corridor, the maintained corridor, the right of way for this pipeline is that boundary. And so it was very important during the planning process that we talked and worked really closely with the National Forest and their staff to ensure that our methods, as well as our accesses and things like that, were specific to the National Forest, but also in keeping with plans for the National Wilderness as well.
All right, so continuing on project planning. So how does early planning lead to environmental project success? So managing those risks up front, those environmental risks, that's Jordan and our team focuses on those environmental risks, focuses on how we can help TC Energy achieve their commercial goals, but yet manage those environmental risks and reduce or eliminate our impacts to the environments in which we operate in. This means we work with project teams early and often, and it's very critical for us to work with those project teams. We have to clearly identify those risks and mitigation of those risks, and that begins well before the shovels and the bulldozers, the yellow iron ever get out on one of our locations or one of our projects. It means that, the work we do means we need to take it seriously, and we absolutely do. And we take it seriously about our mitigation measures in how we can reduce or eliminate the impacts to the environment as we have a project in an area such as the Monongahela National Forest. That we take pride in that expertise within our team and the expertise that we may bring on additionally for each project to manage and reduce those risks across the project footprint. Early in the project stages, as I said, way before the bulldozers and shovels show up, our teams are out in the route selection process. We're there through the environmental impact assessments, and we're there during the construction activities, as we'll talk about here just in a few slides, of how we continue to mitigate any potential impacts during the actual construction project. So environmental sensitivities and avoiding or mitigating those impacts that I was just talking about. As I previously mentioned, TC's preferred mitigative measure is to avoid the impact altogether. But where we can't, we do take mitigative steps to eliminate and to reduce those impacts. We're going to talk a little bit more about that on some upcoming slides. But as Jordan talked about earlier, TC works with various regulatory agencies, conservation organizations, local colleges and universities to develop comprehensive mitigation strategies to reduce those impacts for those project areas. For WB Express, as Jordan talked about, we work directly with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the FERC, or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the U.S. Forest Service, the West Virginia Department of Natural Resources, Marshall University, and several other colleges to develop mitigation strategies for several listed, threatened, or endangered bats, a salamander species, and a sensitive rattlesnake species found in this location. We conducted extensive pre-construction surveys, so before there's ever anyone out there, we're out taking assessment of the environment, of the habitat, of the resources along that route, ensuring that we have the proper mitigative measures in place to reduce our impacts for those. And during construction, and especially on this project, because of the sensitive species that were along the route, we deployed species monitors that were out during active construction. There'll be a couple pictures that we show here in just a bit. So some of these folks got the names of snake wranglers, but they were out and they would sweep the construction location prior to each day's activity and then prior to any start and stop of an activity. So if the activity ceased there, they would come back, do that survey prior to any of the work occurring for that day to eliminate and mitigate and reduce those impacts to those sensitive species. Jordan, anything you want to throw in there?
Nope, I think that covers it pretty well.
So during construction, I talked about our snake wranglers that were out on our right-of-way, and the picture to the left depicts the active construction work area during that time. The picture on the right is a picture of the timber rattlesnake. We hired or employed herpetologists that would go out prior to construction. They had the handling permits. They understand the biology of the species. They would sweep the construction work area prior to us doing any of our work every day. And like I said, if there was a pause in action, they would come back out and do that re-sweep. They were out. What they would do was they would look for the timber rattlesnake in this case. They would, if indeed they would encounter a timber rattlesnake, they would capture that snake. They would care for that snake until all activity was completed in that area. During that time, we worked with Marshall University to also collect information for this species to help us glean what types of habitat this snake prefers and gather as much biological data as we could. And then they were released post-construction at the same site that they were caught. So during the construction activity, we were gaining valuable biological information about each of these species along the route.
And John, before you jump into project restoration, just an added tidbit in there. So John talked a lot bit about the herpetologists, and we call them snake wranglers, and the work that they did there in the project, but also as a part of the mitigation efforts to avoid impacts with the species. Some here on this project where it was feasible, the terrain created an issue for that particular type of mitigation effort, but we do it quite a bit in areas with forested wetlands or other impacts where we see this species and also other species of rattlesnakes. We also use a material called exclusion fencing. So once we go in, we'll go through, sweep the area, have a herpetologist come in, sweep the area, ensure that there are no species to be potentially be impacted, then commence with construction activities, any sort of ground disturbing activities in that area. Once that area, the ground is cleared and there's no other area there that the species could utilize as habitat. So if you're removing temporarily that area that they could use as habitat, we then put up exclusion fencing on either side of our workspace to ensure that the species isn't moving through. And then for any areas where there is potential risk for the species to move through, we also continue to use the herpetologists on a daily basis, like John said, every morning before any activity starts, as well as commencement after any stop period as well.
Hey, Jordan, one question. Even with the sweeps, did you encounter any unexpected species within this national forest besides the ones that you guys talked about?
So we didn't encounter any species that were unanticipated. We did, however, encounter one species we weren't expecting in that area. We knew that the species was in the vicinity, but our particular right-of-way, because of the vegetation, we didn't anticipate that to be habitat for that specific particular species. That species is called a cheap mountain salamander, and it was actually this really incredible opportunity because it was the construction contractors who spotted. It was actually and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's actually an equipment operator who spotted a salamander crossing the workspace. It was crossing the right of way in front of this person. He spotted it. He pointed it out to our environmental inspectors who are on site working with the team. The inspector went over and took a look at it and identified it as a cheap mountain salamander, which is on the threatened and endangered species list. And this actually created an interesting opportunity for the project to work with academia, because that particular species wasn't the right of way itself, and the vegetation of the right of way wasn't considered habitat for that species. And so what it did is it provided data to those species experts to help them better understand the increased habitat that species could be able to thrive within. John, do you want to add any more? I know you're really close to you were really close to that project during that time, and the university we worked with was actually Marshall University during that time.
Yeah, the only thing I would add there, Jordan, is additional information for species that they previously thought would not utilize an open area like our right of way, and we were able during the project to gather additional information with the help of Marshall University to gather that species information that they just didn't have. So help build that biological knowledge for that species and what ultimately could positively impact that species long term for the habitats that they utilize or they possibly don't utilize.
And just before John moves on, for us to clarify, when we're talking about the difference in vegetation or open areas, so the photo on the screen right now is a maintained right of way. This isn't on the WB Express project, but it is a maintained right of way. And so you can tell that when we're talking about the difference between open areas and the forested areas that are, surround it. So for safety reasons, we keep our right of ways clear of woody vegetation and trees of a certain diameter. And so often the right of way itself can be habitat to other species that may not be in the surrounding off right-of-way areas due to their vegetation.
Thank you, Jordan. I had to go to mute there for a second. Had someone come in the office. So project restoration. So restoration is defined as the process of returning the disturbed land to an equivalent land capability. And that is the ability for the land to support various land uses similar to the land prior to the disturbance. This includes ensuring stable, non-hazardous, non-erodible soil conditions and seeding and enabling the reestablishment of vegetation as appropriate in accordance to really of any of the applicable regulatory bodies and regulations for that area. So there are numerous factors that go into planning restoration. And there are various regulatory agencies and land managing agencies that we will collaborate with on determining what may be the best restoration seed mixes for those particular areas. So with that, if you want to go on, Jordan, to the next slide, we'll walk through some of the contributing factors to restoration. So TC developed a comprehensive restoration plan for this project. And as I said on the slide previous, we worked with those respective land managing agencies to develop those plans that are appropriate and would be the most successful for the areas and the soil types in which we're operating. This coordination with those agencies led to several fairly innovative techniques and applications as we reseeded our right-of-way. So in the picture, you see a helicopter with what looks like a bucket hanging underneath it with maybe a green spray coming out of that. So that's hydroseeding, but it's hydroseeding via a helicopter. So if you don't know, hydroseeding or hydraulic mulch seeding is a planting process where we use a slurry of seed, soil amendments, water, and the green color is a fiber mulch to help with germination. We use that, we mix it in a slurry, and it's applied via a hose, or in this case, in this extreme terrain in this area, we used helicopters to reduce our environmental impact. So less equipment out on the ground. You can stage that helicopter from one location, refill the bucket, if you will, and they apply that seed to our right of way without any kind of ground contact whatsoever. So that technique allowed us to reduce our environmental impacts. And actually, it's a faster and more effective way for reseeding and reestablishing the native cover for that area. And on this project, because of that extreme terrain, we use several advanced sediment erosion control techniques and products that are designed for these extreme terrain type situations. These are eco-friendly products that help build the appropriate soil microbes and soil structure for the seeds to germinate and ensures really the effectiveness of our restoration. We also we brought agronomists in, which are soil scientists, to help us develop a very comprehensive soil mapping, soil profile, soil composition reporting that allowed us to fine tune the seeding, the amendments that are needed to help ensure the seed to grow, to put that together to ensure the success and really ultimately reduce our impacts across the footprint of the project. We also used native pollinator friendly mixes in various portions of the right of way. As you can see on the picture, on the right, we use these and develop these seed mixes in conjunction with a local land managing agency to restore the right of way. These mixes accounted for the need to effectively stabilize the ground, yet provide additional or enhancement to the habitat for pollinator-friendly type species. And I think I saw a comment come in about bird species, and but these are very beneficial for bird species. There's bumblebee species out there. There's monarch butterfly species that benefit from these pollinator-friendly type seed mixes that we use in the areas where appropriate along the right of way.
And John, just to add in there as well, so the use of pollinator mixes or appropriate seed mixes for these types of areas, they are things that are they are things that we look at often. We talked about the difference. I mentioned the difference between our right of way and the cover for our right of way and the forested areas around them. So often, areas like our right of way create really kind of perfect habitat for, or potential habitat for, species like the monarch butterfly. This is something that is a something that we do fairly often. It's a pretty simple addition for us to include a pollinator mix in our seed mixes, and it really creates this great opportunity and this larger area of habitat for sensitive species like the monarch butterfly that are seeing just drastic reductions in available habitat.
Thank you. So as I mentioned several slides back, we prefer to, at TC Energy, to avoid impact altogether. There are times where we can't on a particular project. So when we do, we mitigate those impacts. And most of the time, it's with some type of habitat creation along those footprints. So for this project, we developed extensive mitigation plans, obviously in conjunction with those cooperating agencies to offset those impacts during construction. As a result, we created numerous enhanced habitat locations for that cheek mountain salamander and for the timber rattlesnake. We also did for several bat species as well. And the pictures shown are kind of the natural habitat for the salamander and some of the enhanced rocky areas that we created for both the salamander and the rattlesnake. One thing I would like to mention, and I just could not figure out how to get it to play in this presentation, is a YouTube channel called Brave Wilderness. Brave Wilderness did an episode called Rattlesnake Rattle. You won't believe what's inside. And they followed our biologists post-construction and followed them along as we studied these habitats and the usage of the habitat by the timber rattlesnake. And once again, that's a YouTube channel, Brave Wilderness, and the episode is Rattlesnake Rattle, You Won't Believe What's Inside. That episode is about this particular project and the habitat enhancement that we did along the way. I wanted to share that because it's really neat. I just couldn't figure out how to play it in this and not get all the ads that pop up during a normal YouTube play. And I think that's about all I have, Jordan.
Yeah, just a plug for that video as well. It's very interesting. It's interesting for us, but it's appropriate. It would be appropriate, or I would assume it would be appropriate to show to school age students as well. I have a nephew who is a middle schooler and who is very interested in science and snakes and species like that. He loves this video. He absolutely loved the video and all the hands-on work that the herpetologist did during the shooting of that video.
All right, and I see the link is in the chat. Thank you.
Yes, and we just have time for just like 2 questions. One that came in a while ago was, how did you guys come about, especially Jordan, you spoke about an internship that you had that kind of brought you into the field. So they wanted to know, how did you come about that internship?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk about it. So I worked with my professors and like in situations for high school age students, your guidance counselors and folks like that. They they were very willing to help me once I kind of identified for them my interests. They helped me seek out opportunities where outside of my formal education, I could advance that interest. So that internship, I will say, was one of the most beneficial things I did during my my higher education. It was a great hands-on opportunity, and it really gave me the opportunity to determine if a career in the energy industry was something that maybe I thought was interesting as opposed to something that I really wanted to do. It also gave me great opportunities for future job opportunities. So the internship that I did when I was in law school actually turned into, that was a senior internship, and it actually turned into an entry-level position once I graduated from school. But I would just plug the the use for groups like CEE, as well as other if you have an environmental interest, other environmental groups, conservation groups within your communities. They are often helpful places to point you in the right direction for those opportunities as well.
And then one last question. Did you guys encounter any terrain on the project where you weren't able to safely complete the task at hand? Kind of like the picture you showed with the cranes, and you said they were chained together.
Yeah, so when we actually got to the project, because of that advanced project planning, we avoided some areas that we didn't believe that we could complete safely. So once we got out there, we were able to complete the project. However, during that pre-project planning, why it's so important for the environmental groups and the engineers to work together, the land agents and the entire project team, to identify those areas where we just can't work safely or couldn't complete that task in that particular area.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for such a wonderful presentation. It was definitely interesting because I think we all see these right-of-ways as we're driving on the highways and byways, but we never really think about what goes into maintaining them, but also the habitats within them and the bigger picture of what type of energy is being transported throughout those ways. So that was very interesting.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to point out, I shared a link to the TC Energy Scholarships. So if that interests you, please check those out. And they will also be in a follow-up email from this webinar. So if you don't get the link, you will receive it there.
All right. Any other questions for us?
No, I believe that
So just want to say thank you to our wonderful sponsors for the Teacher Enrichment Program and STEM Licensing Program. And then we also just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us. You will receive a follow-up email with a feedback survey that you can complete at your own leisure. If you can just complete that once you get it, and just stay on the lookout for that email, and also on the lookout for any more webinars from both Teacher Enrichment Program and STEM Licensing.
So thank you all again for joining us, and have a good evening.